Sonic. Whenever I see an animal mascot, I'm always curious as to how true to life the character was inspired from its real-world counterpart.
For starters, hedgehogs are cutie patooties. Yeah, I said that. For a surprisingly small animal, they can move pretty fast, just like Sonic. They also have spiky hair, also like Sonic. So far, we're doing pretty good for drawing inspiration. Seems like most times I see animal-related mascots that get the stupid things right, but not the real-world stuff right. Take the Bubsy series, for example. Great, you've got yarn in there. Man, you guys are clever. How about making it like all the cats I know? You know, the ones that spend all day licking their sack right after they slurped up their own vomit and take precious time out of their day to bring some bird carcass to your doorstep?
Remind me to thank the neighbors for that.
Another interesting fact about hedgehogs is that part of their defense when they're scared is to roll up into a ball. Again, that's just like Sonic. However, we're talking about defense and not necessarily being able to roll into a ball to crash through solid rock. I'm not so sure that'd be the best weapon to use.
My back! Maybe the real discussion shouldn't be comparing Sonic to the real animal, but instead what he specifically is.
Sonic the Hedgehog is what I would call a genetically engineered corporate idea. It wasn't like Mario. Mario was a character originally made for a game that would eventually become larger than life due to its popularity. Sonic, on the other hand, was deliberately built to compete with Mario and help drive the sales of Sega products. The easiest way to put it is Mario is Rocky and Sonic is Ivan Drago. Now, when talking about the character of Sonic, he again was the byproduct of the culture that was going on at the time in the 1990s, where everything had to be in your face and
extreme, radical, hardcore, bodacious, testicular tubuloso, motherfucker, with a can of late titty caca.
If the 90s was a giant ass, Sonic is what they shat out. That's not saying Sonic is crap. That couldn't be further from the truth because the Sonic series is outstanding. I guess the easiest way to explain the problem with this is that Mario could be placed in any time frame and it would fit. When it comes to Sonic, he has exactly one note, and that note is the attitude of the 90s, which unfortunately isn't timeless and of course makes him dated. But in reality, this marketing ploy worked on all of us. As you already know by now, I'm a huge Mario fan, and I was extremely attracted to the Sonic commercials.
Last time I mentioned Super Mario Bros., I said it was like living on a planet with nothing but Michelle Pfeiffers. So if that was like living on a planet of hotness, then Sonic the Hedgehog was like living on a planet with nothing but girls from James Bond movies. Ultimately, you want to be faithful to Michelle Pfeiffer, but at the same time, you wouldn't mind spending a few nights with a Bond chick.
Truth be told, during the time that the Sega Genesis was released, I was still pretty glued to my NES, but I was still keeping one eye open with regard to the future of gaming. Once Sega replaced Alex Kidd with Sonic, suddenly they had my undivided attention. Given the price of the system, there was no way I was going to be able to get one at that age, but as luck would have it, the company my mom was working at the time just happened to have occasional PC software sales that were set up like a swap meet, and they invited my sister and I to try to sell the software. Now, I don't want to sound too cocky, but for an 11-year-old with a goal in mind, I was very aware of my childlike marketing abilities.
Buy my software.
Oh, I'm sorry, little guy. You don't have any software that I want. Cash or check?
By the day's end, I had enough money to buy from another vendor at the software swap meet. Once I finally got the Sega Genesis home, I popped in Sonic the Hedgehog, and the rest is history. That's what you call 16-bit platforming. The music alone reminds me of the first summer playing it when I was about 6 inches from the screen. Needless to say, I was hooked. So what about the gameplay? It's really what defined the Sega Genesis for me. Speed. So much speed. well beyond what I was accustomed to. Just trying to follow Sonic in certain areas had my head spinning. I love this game. But what's not to like? Well, there are a couple of nagging issues to me. Undoubtedly, we're going to be making more comparisons to the Mario franchise because games-wise, they were the dueling banjos. Firstly, I was immensely satisfied with the original Super Mario Bros. Trilogy at this time and was very used to the kind of momentum it offered. With Sonic, the momentum is outrageously slow at first and then suddenly speeds up to a titillating rate. The platforming is where the game isn't quite as good to me as the Mario series because the jumping has never felt like an exact science as it has with Mario. You might be thinking that it wasn't trying to be a Mario game, but I have to disagree as there are several parts that implement the same type of platforming you'd find in a Mario game, and it just doesn't work that well here. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure why that is. It might have to do with the controls that aren't as polished for areas like these, or maybe it has something to do with the up and down speed that Sonic possesses. I'm not hating on the game by any means, there's just something about the jumping without momentum that has always felt off to me. So for these parts, I've always thought of them as kind of a drag because realistically, with the speed that Sonic has, you want to move as fast as you can. And I guess that's the other thing I don't care for in this game, the constant spots that deliberately drop your speed. As I mentioned before, because of how Sonic moves, you desperately want the momentum to keep going. In the beginning stages, this isn't a problem, but as you get deeper into the game, there are numerous times where a wall or rocks or just something is deliberately placed in your path that is designed to purposely slow you down. I'm not talking about dead ends. I'm specifically talking about paths you have to take. Imagine if you were cursed with moving at large speeds and then suddenly something was placed in your way to stop you.
My face! My face!
What makes it worse is the fact that your momentum starts back up very slowly. Even though I view this as a negative, it's also a double-edged sword. What I mean by that is that no matter what, each stage has at least a section of track that's designed for you to go fast on. So I do look at it like this. A glass of water to drink is quite frankly pretty boring. But imagine going for a 2-mile jog and then getting to sit down and stare at a glass of water that you can't have for another 2 hours. Once those 2 hours are up, you can finally have a drink and suddenly that very boring glass of water you're drinking is now the greatest beverage you've ever had. That being stated, this constant slowdown in the game does end up making those tracks designed to utilize your speed all that much more satisfying.
So, I guess my complaints have been voided.
Some of these tracks, you know the programmers were doing it on purpose. Look at this example. Who the f*** puts a spring there? And this isn't the only one. The entire series has several spots like this. It's almost like the game is telling you, oh, you're having fun? Well, let me shove a spring up your ass. That'll teach ya. Nevertheless, it's still a minor complaint. It certainly doesn't kill the experience, as Sonic the Hedgehog is one of the most enjoyable experiences you'll get. Not only is it so much fun taking a lot of the speed-induced tracks, but you have additional power-ups that'll increase your speed, give you powers similar to the star in any given Mario game, or even additional protection bubbles that'll let you take a free hit. Speaking of which, when I first played this, I initially thought that was a waste, considering the fact that your life is for the most part based on your coins. As long as you have a coin, you can still take a hit. The funny thing is, even though you can take multiple hits and keep grabbing the coins you lost, the game still manages to be challenging, and it's the good kind of challenging, the type that doesn't feel cheap. At the end of the final act for each stage, you do fight a variation of the main boss, Dr. Robotnik, or sometimes referred to as Dr. Eggman, which is probably a little more appropriate since when I look at him, I can't help but imagine that at some point in his life he unhinged his jaw and swallowed a giant egg. I've never found any of these too difficult, but they certainly vary in challenge. One thing is for sure, no matter the difficulty, it's still fun to the last hit. And when you've gotten totally bored and wanted to do something different, there was the debug mode code. Ah yes. As a retro gamer, it's kind of a sin not to know the Contra code, so it's pretty much stapled to my brain. But if there was ever a code I could remember just as well as the Contra code, it was the debug mode code. Here you can turn yourself into almost any sprite in the current level you're in, and let me tell you, if this isn't fun for you, you have no soul. Just like after the first Super Mario Bros., I wondered where could Sonic go next? The answer we got was more satisfying in my eyes. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 not only kept the same formula, but improved everything. The levels were better and more involved, the music was still perfect but somehow fresh. You could now hold down and push the jump button rapidly to rev up Sonic, which I've always had this strange addiction to. There seemed to be more areas where you could utilize that speed that only a Sonic game would have, and the platforming, while not perfect, was clearly better. I still can't get over how great the different worlds were. My favorite is the casino stage. So much to do and play around with, it was a blast. If that's not enough, you have also this two-player sort of mini-game where you could compete in a race of partial levels against a friend. I can't even begin to tell you how many times my sister and I would play this. We made so many personal competitions out of this, it was insane.
Your face is stupid.
Your face is caca.
Your face looks like your neck threw up.
Your face looks like a monkey swinging from the ugly tree!
Your face looks like a goat testicle that was beaten by an anti-PETA protester.
Your face is an endless well of nothingness that sits on the edge of forever.
Want to go another round?
Yes, I do.
In this case, Sega really did what Nintendo don't with regard to comparing Sonic 2 and Mario 2. We had overall improvements and the original formula was still there, plus the fact that we weren't handed an outright lie. With Sonic 2 being nearly perfect, I couldn't wait for the next game. Then finally, in January of 1994, we got Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Often, Sonic 3 is considered to be the very best in the entire series. New maneuvers, bosses at the end of every single stage, and they destroy everything in their path, giving you a real sense of chaos around you. Sonic 3 seemed to push the Sega Genesis hardware as far as it could go, and it showed. You could now play as Sonic or Tails. You also have a save feature, which was perfect if you got stuck in the later stages. Another thing cool about Sonic 3 is they introduce you to Knuckles. At the time, we all wished we could play as Knuckles because he looked so badass. Later that year, we got our wish with Sonic and Knuckles. I remember thinking, wow, that was fast. Now that I'm older, I understand why. Apparently, Knuckles was going to be a playable character in Sonic 3, and due to timelines and costs, they had to release the game separately. Because of this, Sonic & Knuckles has this top lid that you can open, and it allows you to stick either your Sonic 2 or 3 cartridges on, and you'll now be able to play as Knuckles in either of these games. That is fazzucking cool. What's even more awesome is that Knuckles can glide toward things, and with his knuckles he can stick to the walls like Spider-Man. Everybody loved this guy, and for me it was love at first sight, because any character that had anything protruding from his knuckles was instantly awesome and something I fantasize about emulating in real life.
Now that I think about it, this must be one of the earliest examples we have of downloadable content on a console.
While both Sonic 3 and Knuckles were excellent games, still my favorite is Sonic 2. And it's mainly due to the fact that my sister and I had so much fun with it, and when it comes right down to it, the games I've usually enjoyed the most are the ones I had a friend with me enjoying the same experience. An outstanding series the Sonic games were, and they were an excellent answer to the Mario titles offered through Nintendo. But once again, we had to ask ourselves, what would be next? We're coming into the 3D era. Nintendo had Mario 64, which was amazing and fully revolutionized how 3D games of this nature should be utilized. My hopes were bursting through Cloud9 for Sega's response. And what did we get? Pain. Just a lot of pain. Sega seemed like they just couldn't get a hold of the world of 3D. There's so many bad 3D games that have come out even after the great fall of Sega. I'll certainly give credit to Sonic Adventure for the Dreamcast, but even there the camera was a constant, devastatingly frustrating issue, which is a real bummer because it's a pretty good game. That's not really Sonic's fault though. In the end, you can have a really great character, but the actual gameplay falls onto the programmers. So the real question should be what was going on with the programmers that were handling the potential future successes of Sonic? Many of the other games that have come after the initial trilogy were fairly creative and unique, but that only takes you so far if you don't have the care or know-how to create an intuitive experience. What was going on at Sega? Over time, Sega was beginning to get a reputation for putting out a system and quickly abandoning support for it, and focusing on the next piece of hardware. Third-party software developers were clearly getting irritated, and one of the more noticeable third parties, EA, pulled their games after Sega dropped the Sega Saturn. Just sitting back and thinking about Sega's heavily publicized antics, can we conclude something similar was happening internally? Were the programmers being hit with heavy deadlines? Was research and development not being maintained with the proper funds? Were the programmers just not skilled enough to handle the new era? Or was Sega thinking the popularity was so strong for Sonic that they could put anything out and fans would come running to the stores with their hard-earned cash as long as it bared the name? These are all questions that we can add several bullet points to for an argument, but in reality, none of us truly know what was going on over there.
You have to understand that if you liked any of the 3D Sonic titles, there's nothing wrong with that. That simply just means maybe you saw the forest for the trees. I like bad dudes, for crying out loud. But when it comes to how Sega was handling future Sonic titles, my opinion resides with the majority on this subject.
Thinking about Sonic's overall history and how he was handled in general, it's always felt like the games were made for 2D side-scrolling anyway, and personally that's how I like it best. Even with Mario, my favorite games have always been in 2D. As I said last time when I spoke about Mario, I said his boundaries were so limitless that he has the ability to come back and cater to the old school franchise and still make it a hit.
And here we are with Sonic the Hedgehog 4. And you know what? It's pretty darn good. It took a lot of rough edges to get here, but he still made it.
While Sonic's history hasn't been perfect, he still managed to try to stick with the times, and that's a pretty big challenge when who you are is based on an idea that the 90s conjured up. He's managed to somehow reinvent himself, so much so that even after Sega pulled out of the world of consoles, that he's still in the hearts of many. Even with all the bad Sonic games that have come out since the original trilogy, fans have still stood by Sonic. That's saying a lot. That goes to show you just how much we all love him, that we're willing to trudge through the mud and fog just for a glimpse at what could be Sonic's next AAA title. It's a real testament to a character when I can go to a toy store and still see Sonic toys sitting next to Mario toys, or the fact that games exist where Mario and Sonic compete against each other. When I play Smash Bros. Brawl, I still get goosebumps when Mario and Sonic are on screen. They are powerhouses. And in the end, both deserve the highest spots in gaming history.